Hare Krishna. Turning to verses 8 and 9, we're going to scan 2 verses today. And these are really interesting verses because, we talk a lot about reincarnation. And we have mentioned that the Bhagavad Gita is the handbook of yoga, philosophy, spiritual wisdom. Now Krishna talks about reincarnation and how it is. What are the rules by which we accept another body, by which we receive another body? So this is part of Purushottam Yoga, or Yoga of the Supreme Person. I hope that you've read through this chapter and sort of gotten a good feeling for it. Here, verse 8 goes in this way. Shariram yaravapnoti yatchap ukramatishvara grihit vaitani shamyati bayur gandam ivashayat shrotam chakshu, this is verse 9, sparshanam cha rashanam granam evacha adishtaya manaschayam vishayam upasevati. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So we start off, as is characteristic of Krishna, by having a example. And from that example, Krishna then extrapolates to the point that he wants to make. So listen to this. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aroma. So we have conceptions. What are those conceptions? Conceptions are the impressions upon our mind and our intelligence that actually mold us, condition us. So remember, I've mentioned this a few times, is that when we talk about the body, we talk about this gross body, the one that you're seeing, and which is made up of senses and so many other things. And then there is the subtle body. And the subtle body comprises the mind, the intelligence, the false ego, and the soul. So, the soul is the spiritual body, and those three are surrounding it, but they comprise, or they make up altogether the subtle body. And it's that subtle body that carries the soul from one body to the next. But that subtle body is molded. And this is not easy stuff. As I mentioned, this is now Jnana Yoga, or what we're reading here is really metaphysical knowledge. So the subtle body is molded, which means that as I take another body, then my identification comes along with me. Just like we came into this world and we started behaving and thinking and feeling in a certain way. Now, part of that was as a result of the type of input we got as a baby, as a child, as a young adult. But part of it, we started behaving in certain ways before we got conditioned. For example, some children will refuse to eat certain things before they even have an idea as to what the different types of food are available to eat. Where does that come from? Children are born with certain skills, certain natures. Some are born musicians, others are born mathematicians. Where does it come from? It's coming from the previous, as with different conceptions of life, the molding from the previous body. And the example is, just like the air carries aroma. So there's no aroma in here right now. There's no incense burning. But if there was, and the incense burner is over there, then the air wafts, brings over in my direction the smell of the incense. So similarly, Krishna says, those same conceptions, they're also moving just like air. And thus one takes one body and again quits another. As our conceptions in this life, we have the same conceptions and the same type of molding, go from one body to one body. As our body changes, it goes from our youth body to our old man body and so on. So similarly, that those conceptions then, and especially those which we've accumulated in this life, then they take another one. Now, the living entity thus takes another gross body. Okay, we've taken another gross body, and obtains a certain type of ear. I got big ears. A certain type of eye. I have brown eyes. Tongue, which is wagging right now. Nose. I won't say anything about that. A certain sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. Thus he enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So altogether, why do I look like this? It's a byproduct of grouping around the mind and how the mind has different conceptions. So according to my state of mind, according to my subtle body, and according to my karma, which is the activities that I've performed, because karma is there in everything, I look like this. And you all know how you look. You look the way you look. And everyone looks the way they look as a result of two things. Their karma. In other words, what is it that they deserve? The results of their activities, and also the conditioning that they are inheriting from a previous life. The translation here, the conceptions of life from one body to another. And not only does that mean that this is how we look, but as I've mentioned earlier, this is how we act, this is how we think, this is the level of intelligence that we have, these are the skills that we have. We can acquire certain skills, but acquired skills are different than inherited skills, or skills that are coming over to us from before. So anyone can learn music, or practically anyone can learn music, but that's a different thing than being a musician. So, and sometimes a musician, a good musician, for instance, a pianist, they sit down, they watch someone play, and they just play along. Whereas someone else who isn't a pianist, well, he has to learn. So here, the transmigration of body, the rules and the laws are given in summary form. There's so much actually to be unpacked from this. And there's more, of course, but Krishna says in the next verse, the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor do they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. Remember what the modes of nature are. But those whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So those people who are foolish, those people who really don't think very much, so they can't understand how it is and why someone actually dies and what happens. And nor do they understand that, yes, someone is going to be taking another body. And when we say that our mind is molded in a certain way, that's as stated here, the activities of the modes of nature. But someone whose eyes are trained in knowledge, and that's what Bhagavad Gita is doing. It is training us in knowledge. Someone whose eyes are trained in knowledge, they can see all this. And we're going to hear a little more about Purushottam Yoga in our next session. Hare Krishna.